We're in this series now called Unleashed. This is the last Sunday of it. So we're going to finish up here today with Matthew 25. Here on the screen is our next series coming up next week. We called it For Such a Time as This. And so we'll launch that next week, just a journey through a couple chapters in the book of Acts about what it means to be the church at this time, in this day and age. As 200-year-old church, we're still a baby compared to the church that began in Jerusalem in Acts chapter 1. So we're still young in that, but what's beautiful that I believe about the church is it just means it's our turn. Like it's our turn to be the church. It's our turn to take on the mantle of what was begun thousands of years ago. And so we're going to talk about that over the next few weeks. But again, next week is homecoming. And so for those of you who aren't Baptist, I want to explain to you what that means. It means that we invite people to come back home, just like your high school homecoming, same kind of thing. So if you got people that have moved away or gone away, maybe they're at different churches, but you want them to come back and celebrate, the invite is out there. We will have refreshments to follow because the hope is that there'll be people you haven't seen in a long time that you'd like to see. If you don't want to see them, there are exits everywhere. You can sneak right out and not have to see them because like any family reunion, there's always that happens. If you need me to call you for an emergency, just let me know and we'll send out some calls. But that's next week, so we're looking forward to that next week. On the screen now are some scriptures I'm going to go through this morning. We're going to do a lot of Matthew, and I think that's right, because Jesus here in Matthew 25 is going to take a bunch. He's going to take a bunch of what he's already taught through his ministry, particularly in the book of Matthew. He's going to bring it all together. He's actually even going to take creation. He's going to take Genesis, and he's going to look at Revelation and pull that together for this central moment here in Matthew chapter 25. And like anything, it's important that we study all of that in context as well. Any of your kids chew with their mouth open when they eat? Anybody have kids that do that? Okay. I want to introduce you to a psychological concept called attunement, which essentially means our kids mimic the behavior they see in us. We good? Where'd you learn how to eat like that? You, by watching you for 16 years. That's how they learn to eat like that. That's how. The sounds they make. Anybody else just really averse to the sounds your kids make while they're eating or drinking? Yeah. What I'm learning is I make those same sounds, and my wife lets me know very graciously that I'm the one who makes those sounds as well. It's called attunement. You ever notice that the longer people are married, they begin to look like each other? Have you noticed that as well? She begins growing facial hair. It's a whole thing that happens. So again, that's this idea, this concept called attunement. It's why your kids look like you. Even if you've noticed, even adoptive kids, like families with adopted children, sometimes they begin to look like their parents, their adopted parents. And it's crazy how it happens, even though their skin tone might be different and all of that. But there's something where like, yeah, I can tell you belong to him or you belong to her. The idea is that when we're younger, we mimic what's in front of us. And psychologists are even telling us now that there's something that happens for a baby when they mimic your smile or your laugh or your sad face or whatever it is you do to get their attention, that their facial structure begins to shift and change a bit to match it. So that's why they begin to even look more and more like you. And spouses, the longer you're together, the more you don't mean to, but you begin to look like and sound like the person that you spend the most time with. Again, that's called attunement. You ever seen a boy walking and you're like, gosh, he walks just like his daddy? Have you noticed that? Like there are kids in our church who I'm like, I know who you belong to just by the way that you walk. I can tell whose you are because of that. This is that idea of attunement, that we attune ourselves, we harmonize, we don't even mean to. It's intrinsic within us that we harmonize to our surroundings, particularly those that we are closest to, that we spend the most time with. So that idea, I want us to keep that in mind as we walk through Matthew 25, because that is it's not just a psychological concept, that is a biblical concept as well. And so we're going to see that throughout this passage. I'm going to read through the entire passage, Matthew 25, 31 to 46. I'm going to give some stuff to put it in context, and we're going to go back through it 2 more times because I think there are layers to it that are going to help us to see things. And you can't just stop at one because they all fit together. So here's Matthew 25. Let's read this parable together it's kind of a parable that Jesus gives us. Matthew 25, 31. When the Son of Man, that's Jesus, comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, that's all the peoples of the world, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on the left. And the king will say to those on his right, come, You who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me," or naked for you Georgia people. "I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you? Or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they also will answer, saying, "Lord, Master, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you?" And he will answer them saying, "Truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these, the goats, will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." Have you heard that one before? It's a pretty familiar passage, especially for those of us who grew up in church. It's familiar. It's used a lot to demand that we watch it, right? That we behave while we wait for Jesus to come. And there's some of that that's happening there. But like anything, man, context. We've got to put all this in context. There are a number of layers that are happening here that we miss if we pull it out of its context. Let me just give us a few things to remember, kind of the general context of the book of Matthew. Matthew is a Jewish man writing a Jewish book to Jewish people about a Jewish Messiah. And these Jewish people have an idea of what their Messiah would look like and what he would demand. And then from there, the entire book, the way that Matthew lines it all up, the stories that he chooses are meant to reveal to us that there are two kingdoms, only two. There's the kingdom of this world and the kingdom of heaven. And you got to pick one. You got to pick one. You don't get to have one foot in one and one foot in the other. And we looked back in August of last year in our series called The Kingdom Stories. And we used some of these graphics that this is how Jesus teaches, that there are two options and only two. There's not a third, there's two. You're either in the kingdom of this world or you're in the kingdom of heaven. Those are your options. Now, a lot of us know that because we've been taught that. But what we've been taught is that the whole point of the Christian faith is to deal with the kingdom of this world until you escape to the kingdom of heaven. That's what we've been taught. For many of us, we've been taught, listen, man, you just got to put your time in. And then once it's time to retire from here, you finally get to go to the good place and you can go there eventually. That's what we've taught. And so we're just biding our time. We're doing the best we can with what we have. We've contemplated other things and that's what we've been taught. And it's informed the way that we behave in really sad and sinful ways. Because that's not how Jesus teaches. Jesus doesn't teach his way as an escape. You don't get a ticket that you hold on to until he comes to get you. That's not what it is. He teaches an overlap, the idea that the kingdom of heaven has invaded the kingdom of this world. It's already here and it's now. It's in our midst. The king is here and the king has brought his kingdom with him, which means there are moments that you and I experience the kingdom of heaven on this earth right here, right now, today. We experience that. Now, it also means we're still prone to wander back into the kingdom of this world. We still experience all that comes along with that. But it's not something we're looking forward to getting to. It's something we got to look for now. We open our eyes to it now. But the problem is, even now, that hell happens. There's hell in this world. And by hell, I mean sin, the presence of sin and darkness and evil. You've experienced it, I've experienced it, that there's hell that's happened to us. Evil has crept into our lives. It's caused us to say things and do things, experience things that God never intended for us to experience. But the glory of God, the beauty of what we call the end of the age, of the day of the Lord, is that there's a day coming where he'll get the hell out of heaven, where hell will be removed completely. There's a day coming in which all those things, all the temptations that we struggle with and fight with, your wrestles, your addictions, the pain and the suffering, the tears and the mourning, all of it will be gone for eternity. And that the kingdom of heaven will fully envelop the kingdom of this world and will take it over like kingdoms do. That's what we're longing for. That's what Jesus has been teaching. And remember the immediate context here of Matthew 25. Jesus has stormed into Jerusalem. He's gone to the temple. He's on his way to be crucified. It's the first couple of days of Passion Week or Holy Week. He's flipped over tables in the temple. They thought he was going to go overthrow Rome because they thought Rome was the oppressor. And Jesus is revealing it's not Rome, it's the oppressor. It's the church that's the oppressor. And so he flips over tables. He handles the Pharisees and the scribes and the Sanhedrin. He deals with all of that. And on their way out of Jerusalem, back up to what's called the Mount of Olives, the disciples are blown away by how beautiful the temple is. And Jesus says, yeah, it's cool. I'm going to destroy that, though. And so they have a lot of questions. So they sit down. They come to Jesus like, okay, you said something. We got a lot of questions. When? When are you going to destroy the temple? Because that's the central of our worship. How's that going to happen? When is that going to happen? And you mentioned that you won't come again until they declare you, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. When are you going to return? What does that look like? And how will we know? How will we know how to prepare? And so Jesus has answered these two questions of theirs. The first question, when are you going to destroy the temple? Jesus answered in Matthew 24, verses 4 through 35. I'm going to do it within 40 years, within this generation. Wouldn't you know it? 70 AD, within 40 years, the temple of Jerusalem has been destroyed by an opposing army. The second question of, okay, but when are you going to return and how will we know? Jesus' response is, I don't know. I don't know. But it's not for me to know. It's up to the Father, and he'll tell me. So you don't need to worry about looking for signs and trying to figure it all out and try to figure out how the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse points to this day and looking for red heifers. Don't need to do any of that. I'm just telling you that I'll come when my Father tells me it's time to go. That's how. So he shifts the conversation to, so in the meantime, here's how you need to live. Here's what I expect of you. Here's what it looks like for you. And so he begins to answer those questions of what does it mean to live while we wait in the overlap of these two kingdoms with more parables. So he begins with the parable of the faithful and wise servant. A man goes away, leaves a servant back to take care of the rest of the servants. And the man wants to come back, seeing that servant being faithful and wise, caring for, feeding the other servants. He does not want to come back to see that servant beating the other servants because he got impatient waiting for the master. Which begs the question then, well, what does it look like to be faithful and wise? How do you do that? Jesus is like, well, I'm glad you asked. I have stories about that. So Jesus tells them to be wise. It's like 10 bridesmaids who have gone out to meet the groom who's coming to get the bride. And 5 of them brought enough oil for their lamps to last a long time, and 5 did not. They thought it was going to be quicker. They weren't prepared. And Jesus says the wise ones are the ones who prepared for the long wait, for the long journey. It's going to be a while. That's what it means to be wise. What it means to be wise is to understand it's going to be longer than you think it's going to be. So pack a protein bar. It's going to be a while. That's what he tells them. Then the second question, well, what does it mean to be faithful? Jesus tells them another story about this man who goes away. And he leaves behind 3 servants, and he leaves them millions of dollars. He gives one 5 bags of gold, millions and millions of dollars. One 2 bags of gold, millions of dollars. And then one bag of gold, $1 million, $2.3 million. He leaves all that behind for them. And he goes away for a long time. And he comes back, and he finds the one with the 5 bags, invested it, and got 5 bags more. The one with 2 invested that, got 2 bags more. But the one with 1 did not invest it. He buried it because he didn't want to lose anything. And the master comes back, praises the men with 5 and 2, and then calls the man with 1 wicked and slothful, evil and lazy servant. What did you do? I gave you something based on your ability, and you did nothing with it. You hid it. Therefore, he kicks him out to where there's fire and weeping and gnashing of teeth. And all of that context is leading us here to this conclusion in Matthew 25, 31 to 46. So everything is stacking. Everything's important for us. But Jesus is pulling now from Matthew 13 to give us a picture of what's happening. There are 2 parables in Matthew 13 that were a little bit more distinct than the rest of them. Here's one of them called we call it the parable of the wheat and the weeds, or the wheat and the tares. Matthew 13, 24. Jesus put a parable before them, the disciples, saying the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, the enemy came and sowed weeds. Remember what that's called? Darnel is what that weed is called. Darnel grows to look a lot like wheat. It mimics it until harvest time, and you can tell. He sowed weeds of darnel among the wheat and went away. But when the plants came up and bore grain, the weeds appeared, the darnel appeared also. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, I thought you were good at your job. Didn't you sow good seed in your field? Why are there weeds? And the man says, well, the enemy has done this. So the servant said to him, let's take care of the problem. Let's pull up the weeds. But the man says, no, don't do it yet. Lest in gathering the weeds, you root up the wheat along with them. Don't separate it yet. Verse 30, let them both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers. Jesus explains this later in chapter 13, who are the angels. I'll send my angels. Gather the weeds first, bind them into bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. He's saying it's all going to grow together, and there's coming a day we will separate it. Don't separate it now. We'll separate it eventually. A few verses later, Jesus gives the parable of the net in Matthew 13:47. Again, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and gathered fish of every kind. And when it was full, the men drew it ashore, sat down, and sorted the good into containers, but threw away the bad. It's going to be just like that at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus is saying that while right now we live in the overlap, and we're in between the times where there's the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of this world have overlapped together, but there's coming a day where it won't be like that. And the word he uses is there will be separation, there will be distinction. For now, they grow together because we don't know. We can't tell the wheat from the weeds. We can't tell the good fish from the bad fish, but there's coming a day when the king will come with his angels and he will separate them. There's a harvest time coming. There's an end of the age coming where distinction will be made between the righteous and the unrighteous. And you just need to let that settle on your soul for a second. It's an unavoidable truth in Scripture. It's why when we talk about the idea of Jesus returning, you can neither be apathetic nor obsessed with it. To be apathetic is to not even think about there's coming a day. So it doesn't affect the way you live your life. To be obsessed about it is to be so wired with anxiety that you miss the here and the now. But Jesus is saying there is coming a day where everything will be sorted out. Everyone will be separated, the righteous from the unrighteous. And as that day draws near, the tensions will rise. So we need to be careful. And he's explaining now the distinction is made. How do you know the wheat from the weeds? How do you know the good fish from the bad fish? How do you know the sheep from the goats? It's based on how we live in the meantime. That's how you know. So this is all the context. Let's go back into this conclusion. Verse 31 of Matthew 25. When the Son of Man, that's a very prophetic way of speaking of the Messiah, comes in his glory, and all the angels, remember back to Matthew 13, the reapers, the angels, the sorters, when they come with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, all the peoples from every demographic, every socioeconomic group, every corner of the earth will be gathered. And he will, here's the word, separate people, one from another. In the same way, a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. A shepherd would have a pen, a flock full of sheep and goats, and usually nightly he would separate them and send them different places for sleeping and for safety. And so it's just like that. He's going to separate them. He'll place the sheep on his right, that's the side of honor, but the goats on the left, dishonor. Then the king, so he's a shepherd, but he's also a king. The king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For, or because I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you welcomed me. I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." So if we're asking the question, okay, so at the end of days, how does he make distinction? According to the parable in Matthew 25, he makes distinction, it sure sounds like, based on your merit, on whether or not you deserve it. Read it again. There's no mention of theology and church attendance and whether or not you were a deacon. The question here is about how you treated the least of these, the poor, the weary, the broken, the addicted. How did we handle them? So from the get-go, you're like, well, then I know. Okay, here's how he separates. It's based on our behavior. The righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, I don't remember doing any of these things. When did we give you food? When you were hungry or you were thirsty, we gave you drink. When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, naked or clothe you? When did we see you sick and in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, well, you did it. I'm telling you, you did it. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. And then he'll say to the goats, depart from me, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Real quick, hell was prepared for the devil and his angels, not for people. The plan is not that. So I want you to hear this from me real quick. There is a way to hell, but hell was not prepared for you. If you choose to go there, that's based on a decision you've made, not on a preparation God's made for you. It's prepared for the devil and his angels, but he sends the goats there as well. And he will say to them, I was hungry, you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, you didn't welcome me. Naked, you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, you did not visit me. Which again, merit, it's works-based. This is what you've deserved. You didn't do it. And they'll answer saying, Lord, when? When did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister you? And he'll say to them, truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. Which confirms the assumption, okay, so the distinction is based on merit. Then it says they'll go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. So let's be clear about the first reading. Jesus' conclusion of what we do while we wait for him to return has to do with how we behave. It has to do with our works. I want you to notice again, there's nothing about belief or faith or theology or doctrine. Nothing about church attendance or prayer or Bible reading. Did you see it? When the reapers come, when the angels come to distinguish between the wheat and the weeds, the good fish and the bad fish, the sheep and the goats, what they're looking for is works. Does that bother you? It should, because that's not what you've been taught. But isn't that what he says? I'm coming and I'm bringing the angels. And how will I know if you're wheat or weeds? Oh, by your works. How will I know if you're good fish or bad fish? Based on your works. How will I know if you're a sheep or you're a goat? Based on your works. That's how I will know. That's who you are. So let's put it all together. What is the evidence that you have invested what the master has given to you, whether it's 5, 2, or 1? What's the evidence? According to Jesus in Matthew 25 with the sheep and the goats, the evidence is what you've done with it. It's your works. It's your behavior. What's the evidence that you're the one, you're the wise bridesmaid who has the lamp, who has the oil for the lamp for the long journey? Well, it's works. It's what you've done. It's how you've treated people. What's the evidence? It's whether or not you fed the hungry, gave a drink to the thirsty, clothed the naked, and welcomed the stranger, and you visited the sick and the imprisoned. What is the evidence that you are a sheep and not a goat? Is that you've done these things. If that sounds crazy, it shouldn't sound that crazy because Jesus has already said things like this before. Matthew chapter 12, verse 33, Jesus said, you can either make the tree good and its fruit good, or you make the tree bad and its fruit bad. The tree is known by its fruit. How do you know it's an apple tree? Well, because it has apples on it. That's how you know. How do you know you're a sheep? Well, there are good works in your midst, in your wake. How do you know that you're a good fish or that you're the wheat and not the weeds? Well, there's works that prove it. James, the half-brother of Jesus, would say it this way, James 2:14, what good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but doesn't have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or a sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to him, I'll pray for you, go in peace, be warmed, and be filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Someone will say, well, if you have faith and I have works, then I would say, show me your faith apart from your works. Then I'll show you my faith by my works. Your faith, your belief tells you that God is one. Great. The demons believe that. You know what the demons don't have is good works. The evidence that we are spending the days God's given us to his glory is not based on a doctrinal dissertation you can write or on a sermon you can preach. It's based on whether or not you're doing the things he's asked you to do. How do you know? How do you know your kids have heard you tell them what to do when they do what you told them to do? Obedience. So this is what he's saying. Our works do matter. They do matter. Hear me. Our works matter. How we treat people matters. But I'll make this distinction. Not as what saves us, but rather what gives evidence to the fact that we are saved. The point of this parable is not that you and I go home and make a list to check off. It's not that you go home and decide to start a ministry to clothe naked people, although that would be fine. You should do that. The point is not that. It's to assess whether or not we have fruit. So here's the question, church. Do you have a heart for the least of these? Do you have a heart for the hungry and the thirsty and the homeless and the broken? Or are they a nuisance to you? Are they just in the way of your shopping? Are they in the way of where you're trying to get? Are they in the way of your reputation and your popularity at school? The addicts and the hurting, the mentally unstable, the broken, the divorced. Are they a nuisance? Are they a problem to your bottom line? Let me ask you this. Do you have a heart for them, or do you hate seeing them coming because it ruins your home value and your equity? Do you have a heart for the least of these, or do you see apartments going up and want to get out of Henry County? We good? Evidence that we are sheep and not goats is how we care for the least of these. No, don't make a list of what qualifies as least of these. Let me think of broken people. How we care for broken people. Do you have a heart for the broken person in your small group, or do you not want to go because he's there? Do you have a heart for the broken marriage in your family, or do you avoid Christmas because they're going to be there? So Jesus is pointing explicitly to that no one cares if your theology is right, if your treatment of people is wrong. No one cares. They don't care. But there's more going on than that. Let's go back into it. There's more than that. Matthew 25:31. When the Son of Man, Jesus, comes in his glory, all the angels, the reapers, they come with him. He'll sit on his glorious throne, and before him will be gathered all the nations. And he's going to separate people one from another. He's going to separate. He'll make a distinction from one from another, as a shepherd separates, that is hard to say, the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right and the goats on the left. Now watch how watch the sheep. And the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." So before you leave here and begin thinking your salvation is based on merit and achievement and your works, I want you to read verse 34 again and pay attention to the word inherit. Some of your translations say to receive. The word there is inherit. Do you inherit based on merit? No. You inherit based on relationship. That's how you inherit. So again, before you write a whole theology on how you have to go feed the poor and how God favors the poor over the rich, he doesn't. Before you do that, I want you to come back here and recognize something. The sheep have an inheritance waiting for them. An inheritance is not based on merit or effort. It's based on lineage. It's based on family. And what do they inherit? They inherit the kingdom. They inherit the kingdom. But a word that's interesting here is he says, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father." And we read that and we jump to, well, the blessing is the kingdom inheritance that's been waiting. No, it's not. Look at the chronology. You're blessed, therefore you will get. If you read throughout Scripture, anytime there's blessing, that God blesses or Jesus blesses, the blessing leads to fruitfulness. God blessed the ground and it produced. Jesus blessed that little boy's Lunchable, and when he fed the 5,000, He blessed it, and it produced more than what was given to him. Do you see it? Blessing leads to fruitfulness. Blessing is not a result of fruitfulness. It is the engine of fruitfulness. You're blessed. How do you know? How do you know? How does he know that they're blessed? Well, I see fruit in your wake. That's how I know. You've been blessed. I was hungry, and you gave me food. Here's how I know you're blessed. I saw this. I saw the fruit. I saw that you fed me, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you welcomed me. I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. There's an inheritance waiting for those, not based on merit. Inheritance doesn't come because of merit, it comes of relationship. And he says, I've seen the blessing. That's how I know. How do I know you're mine? Because I've seen this. But then to the goats, look at verse 41. He'll say to those on the left, depart from me, you cursed ones. So if blessing is fruitfulness, you want to take a guess at what cursing is? It's fruitlessness. Throughout the story of Scripture, anytime there is cursing, what follows is fruitlessness. We just saw it in the fig tree in Matthew 23 and 24, but before that, we saw it in Genesis chapter 3. Adam and Eve fall into sin, they run from God, God finds them, and he meets them there. He calls them to repentance. And then there are consequences. He curses the serpent. You're going to crawl on your belly all the days of your life. And he doesn't curse Adam, doesn't curse Eve. He curses the ground. And the result of the curse is it will be hard to get fruit from the ground. So how he's delineating between the sheep and the goats. The sheep are blessed because he can see the fruitfulness. He knows they're blessed because he sees the fruitfulness. He knows the goats are cursed because he sees their fruitlessness. You're cursed. How do I know? Because there was no fruit. I was hungry, you gave me no food. Thirsty, you gave me no drink. A stranger, you didn't welcome me. Naked, you didn't clothe me. Sick and in prison, you did not visit me. So the distinction is not actually based on works. It's based on the fact that the works reveal something underneath it. That's what he's seeing. But the evidence is in the works. Look at this other distinction. Look at Matthew 25:40. When you see the expectation the king has, this is for the sheep. The king will answer them. Truly, I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. In my studying, I was reading a bunch of commentaries, listening to sermons, and reading some stuff about this, and I'm blown away at how many people skip the word one there. And you've probably heard it the same way. Whatever you've done to the least of these. That's not what it says. Whatever you've done to how many? One. As you did it to one of the least of these. The expectation of the sheep was, man, just one. If you can you just have one? Just one. So look at the expectation. Look at what he saw in the goats. Look at verse 45. The unrighteous. He will say, truly, as I say this to you, as you did not do it to even one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. As you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. For the sheep is, hey, just do one. For the goats is, you better not miss one. Don't miss one. Make sure you get all of them. What Jesus is laying out here is law and grace. Anybody, you play Little League ball with coach's son? Anybody do that before? And you recognize that even though you're a better athlete, the coach's son gets to start. Have you noticed that? Or daughter gets to start? And that whenever you make an error, you are the worst baseball player on the face of the planet. But when their son or daughter makes the error, it's probably your fault also. Have you noticed that? Have you seen that? That's kind of what's happening here. I want you to see the discrepancy in expectation. For the sheep who have an inheritance, he's like, hey, you did great. You did it in fourth grade. You did great. You sat with that girl at the lunch table who sat by herself and everybody made fun of her, and you sat there. Awesome. And for the goats, he's like, listen, I know you did a lot of good things, but in second grade, there was this kid who everybody made fun of, and then you also made fun of him, and so therefore, I'm going to kick you to where there's fire and weeping and gnashing of teeth. Do you see the difference? He's delineating, he's making a differentiation, he's making a separation based on it. I think the sheep, we continue, I want to show you just one last piece of separation. Verse 37, the righteous, the sheep will answer him, when? When did we do this? When did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? We did that? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? The righteous are surprised. Listen, I would love to agree with you, but I think we're in the wrong line. I think you got the wrong names. Is it spelled right? Because I don't remember doing any of those things. I don't remember it at all. They didn't have a list of things to check off, didn't have it in their agenda on a Tuesday to serve at the homeless ministry. They didn't understand. They were oblivious to the fact that they had even done it. But then look at the goats. They will answer in verse 44 saying, Lord, when did we miss you? We tried. We were looking for you. We were looking for you and we missed you. They couldn't believe they missed him. Any wives have golfer husbands? Anybody have a husband who's a golfer? Just raise your hand high. You can own it. Okay. Let's say you're at Target and you're shopping. Chances are, while you're looking at whatever Joanna Gaines is selling at the moment, you're looking at that. And I bet your husband's over there practicing his putting stroke, isn't he? Is he just practicing in the aisle? Maybe it's the driver that's off, so he's trying to work on getting those hips moved around, trying to move forward with his right hip. He's working on that in Target, and most normal people are like, "What's your husband okay? What's wrong with him?" He's making weird motions. Everything good? You're like, "Oh yeah, he's just a golfer." Because golfers can't help but practice their game. It's what we do. You practice wherever you are. I grew up playing baseball. I remember and if anytime I'm gonna practice my swing or my throwing motion, I would do it. And my dad would be like, "Hey, can you stop, please? Can you stop? People are looking at us. Can you please stop doing that?" We have, one of our sons is a drummer. He learned to play drums. And you wanna know how I know he's a drummer? Because everything becomes a drum. That's how I know he's a drummer. The car dash is a drum. The kitchen table is a drum. His brother's head is a drum. And that's how I know. How do you know? How do you know someone plays the drums? Because they drum on everything. That's how you know. That is exactly how you know. Anybody have friends that are runners? You just know. You ask them if they ran that morning. Yeah, I ran a few miles. You did what now? Cool. I walked from my garage to my car. Same. But they're not counting and logging. It's not that they just like to run, which sounds crazy. It's just ridiculous to me, but people like that. So here's all I'm saying. You got this sheep who's a lot like the golfer. He doesn't even know he's doing that. He's like, "Hey, baby, can you please stop?" He's like, "Stop what?" "Stop the golf thing in the middle of Target. Can you stop that?" And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea." To our son, can you stop drumming? "Oh, was I hitting the table?" "Bro, our neighborhood knows you were hitting the table, yeah?" So when you look at the sheep, here's what I think is being pointed out to us. When you do something because you love it, you actually don't even know you're doing it. What's beautiful about the sheep, the distinction is they didn't have to make a list to go do these things. They were like, "We did what now?" And I believe Jesus would be like, "Yes. Remember when you were in your 30s and you had just gone through that divorce and there was a girl in your small group who was now a newly single mom and you sat her down and you showed her how to budget now that she's on a single income? Do you remember doing that?" "God, maybe, I don't think so." I said, "Well, you did." And that was like me being there. You helped her with that. You remember when you decided you were gonna help in that second grade small group and there was a kid whose parents were going through a divorce, and you remembered how it was for you, and so you took some time just on that one Sunday to sit with him and to talk, and you're like, man, that was 40 years ago. And Jesus is like, you did it. That was you. You did it like you were doing it for me. Well done. It's a lot like the attunement, isn't it? I think summarize all of it. Here's what I think is happening. The angels have come and they're making the separation and they're trying to figure out which one looks like their dad. Which one looks like their father. And so on the one hand, you've got the people who are doing it, but their attitude is awful. They make a list, they're trying to check boxes to earn something and they just don't look joyful at all, or maybe they aren't doing anything at all. Then on the other hand, you got these people who are like letting other people get in front of them in line. They're helping their kids. They're helping hold babies who are crying while they're waiting in line to be separated. And I think the angels are like, "Oh yeah, that looks like their father. He looks like Jesus." She looks like him. The inheritance must be for them because they look like family. They look like our family. So yeah, your works matter because your works reveal something about you. They reveal your heart. And if you get there and all you can remember and you've got a list of ways that you have achieved something, I think you're in the wrong line. But Jesus has painted the picture of these sheep who have spent so much time with their Father that they just look like him and they sound like him and they walk like him and they treat people like he does. The distinguishing characteristic between the sheep and the goats, again, is not their theology, it's not their doctrine, it's not where they land on worship music. The distinguishing characteristic is how they treat people. And the sheep treat people like Jesus treats people. And the goats don't. So what I don't want us to walk out of here with a list of things to go do, because that defeats the whole point. That just makes you more goat-like than you think it does. What I want us to do is to walk out of here thinking, golly, how do I make my face look like Jesus's? How will people see me and be like, oh, he's one of Jesus' sons, I can tell. She's a daughter of the king, I can tell. Well, luckily, Jesus tells us how to do that. In John 15, this is John's version of these last few days. They're walking through the garden. And Jesus makes this statement. He says, abide in me, rest in me, be with me, dwell in me, and I'll dwell in you. Like a branch can't produce fruit by itself unless it abides, it stays in the vine. Neither can you unless you abide in me. Jesus says, I am the vine, you're the branches. Therefore, whoever abides, connects, lives in, stays in me, and I in him, that's the one who bears fruit. That's the one who feeds the hungry and gives drink to the thirsty. But apart from me, you can do nothing. And if anyone does not abide in me, doesn't get their strength and power and heart from me, he's thrown away like a branch and withers. And the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. But if you do, if you abide in me, if you stay locked into me, and my words then get into you, ask whatever you want and it will be done for you. This is the way my dad is glorified, that you bear much fruit. And that's how you prove you're my disciples. Not your theology, not your doctrine, not where you stand on homosexuality and where you stand on abortion. How do you know? How does the world know? How does Jesus know that you're a son or a daughter of the King? It's that you bear fruit. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Just stay in my love. Just soak in my love. And here's the cycle. And then if you do my commandments, you're going to soak in my love. In the same way that I've kept my Father's commandments and I am now abiding in his love. Here's what I've spoken to you. That my joy may be in you, that your joy may be full. It's the same thing we heard in the parable of the talents. Enter into the joy of your master. This is my commandment. I'm just asking you love one another as I have loved you. Well, what does that look like? Well, greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. What does it mean to be a sheep? It means that you have walked so closely with the Father that you look like him. And then when it's time for the inheritance to be handed out, there's no doubt that you look just like your dad. It's a story told in some ancient Jewish literature about this particular rabbi in this very area who had attracted a bunch of young men to follow him. Over the course of time, there's something distinct about the followers of this rabbi, and it was that these young men had started to limp. And so they tried to figure out why, like what happened, what is he doing in their training that's causing this to happen, only to realize the rabbi himself had a limp from birth. And these disciples of his had gotten so in tune to the way their rabbi walked that these healthy, vibrant 13 to 18-year-old young men had started to limp, not because of anything medical, but because they were following their rabbi so closely. So that when anyone saw these gaggle of teenage boys, like, oh, know who your rabbi is. May it be said of us that when you're seen at the grocery store and at the ball field, when you're seen in your classroom, when you're seen at your workplace, when you're seen on 75 and 81, that people are like, I know whose kid that is. How'd you know? He just looks like Jesus. That attunement thing, man, he became that. So how do we know? Well, it's all in how we live in the in-between times. And more specifically, it's how we treat people while we wait for the King to come back to get us. And as the days get longer and it feels like we're waiting forever, we start to default back into the kingdom of this world. And the challenge here is don't do it. Lean heavier into Jesus. Heavier into Jesus. It's a moment where the disciples are recognized for being disciples. And they're like, hey, aren't those the ignorant, unlearned men from Galilee? And then we learn later, but they could tell that they had spent time with Jesus. My question for us this morning as a church is, can people tell? Not because you argue about theology on social media. Not because you bully people into how to vote. Can they tell by the way you treat the least of these? Would you bow your heads and close your eyes, and we'll wrap up here this morning. I don't know where you find yourself today, but I think there's a couple things we have to wrestle with. First is the question of fruit. Is there fruit in your life? Is there evidence, based on the way you treat people, that you're a son or a daughter of the King? In such a way that when they're handing out the inheritance, it would be unmistakable whose you are. And if not, I think we need to do some digging around in our heart and our souls. If your first response was that you've got a list of fruit, I don't know that we get it. I think even then we got to do some digging around in our souls. If your response was, no, I've got this fruit because of this mission trip I went on, I just wonder now, where are you? Because you'll hold babies in Guatemala, but you won't serve in the nursery at your church? For some of us today, we're striving and striving to earn something that is not meant to be earned. It's meant to be handed down to the children. So you're pursuing salvation based on your effort and your merit. And then you read this passage, it's like, yeah, I knew it. I'm telling you, that's not what this passage says. I want you to know Jesus, who gave up his life for you to invite you into this journey together. And salvation is not found in your achievement. It's found in the way that we follow the rabbi, Jesus. He laid down his life for his friends. Father, we come to you today, not as a people who are perfect, but you're not surprised by that. You knew it when you saved us. You knew it when you met us. And yet in your grace, you've invited us in. And you've set the bar pretty low for us when it comes to works. God, I pray that you would draw us deeper into abiding in you. That we would start to look like you and sound like you and smell like you. That it would be unmistakable whose kid we are. So as we wait for you to come, may we be faithful and wise. May we invest in the one that you've placed us in front of. May we bring enough oil for the long journey that is ahead. May we hear the words, well done, good and faithful servants. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.